live on LinkedIn. It'd be useful to know. Okay. I can't hear you, but yep. Okay, good. Excellent. I think we're starting, and I think I may have already been live, but that's okay. We don't mind. Hi, everybody. Squirrel here, and you are at the Squirrel Squadron. And I was just commenting to my good friend Laura, who is the community manager for the Squirrel Squadron. She's checking out to make sure we're actually live on all the right platforms. Apparently, there's a problem on LinkedIn. And you know what? I've had trouble with my internet connection. So the world may explode today, but we're still going to have fun, and we're going to talk about marking to market. So Laura, wave at me if we're not live on LinkedIn, or send me a private chat, and then I'll be aware of it. But I'm glad to have all of you here. And what we're going to be talking about today is marking to market. In other words, measuring the value that you're getting from your technology investment. So if that's interesting to you and that's where you want to be, then you're at the right place. I should tell you just a little bit about how this works and who I am. So this is part of the Squirrel Squadron, which is my community of tech and non-tech people working together. The squadron comes from my work as a consultant. I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of different companies on improving their performance all across the board, but especially in technology. And the way I do that involves often measuring whether you're actually getting value from a huge amount of money that you're spending. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I do these events every week. There's live streams and Zoom calls. And last week we were in person and in London, and we do lots of different material like this. That's my way of giving back and my way of encouraging now thousands of people that are in the squadron to collaborate across the tech, non-tech boundary. So examples of events coming up. Next week, we're talking about how to wow your board. So boards of directors are often quite bored, B-O-R-E-D, by technology. And how do you avoid that? How do you make sure it's exciting and interesting? I had one person telling me that, he can't even get on the agenda. So he can't get technology into his board discussion. So we'll talk all about how to do that, how to make sure they're interested, involved, excited, and you're accountable to the people who, at the end of the day, are paying for the salaries and the computers and everything else that let your tech team be productive. So whether you're a CEO or a CFO or a CTO, I think that'll be very interesting. We also have a couple more live streams coming later in July, which are with some members of the squadron and friends of mine who are real experts in their areas. We're going to talk about nonprofits and governments and how they're kind of different from the companies that many of us often work in. And if you're in one of those, how is technology meaningful there? I talk about profitable technology. What does that mean when you don't have any profits to look at? Well, actually you do. So we'll talk about that. And I have another on supply chain. That's the first one's with Andrew Hollow from Australia. So we're going to do it at an earlier time. And then we have one more with Lisa Anderson, who is a world-class expert on supply chain. So we all know through COVID, we had these terrible supply chain challenges. Well, Lisa knows why they happened and what technology can do about them. It's less and more than you think. So we'll be talking about all those things. That's events coming up. We're having great discussions on the forum. Goodness, I can't list all the number of different things that we've been talking about today. I was commenting on impossible problems and things that I don't think might be solved. We had a great argument and discussion about how to be secure if you're using artificial intelligence, how to make sure your data is protected. There's literally thousands of people who are on the forum, not all of them on every day all the time, but loads of people who are available to you for questions, comments, and thoughts. You can find out all about this at squirrelsquadron.com. That's the end of me advertising my free service. How much better can that be? But let's talk about marking to market. And I want to make sure I hear from all of you. Laura hasn't waved at me, so I assume we're on LinkedIn as well as the other platforms. And wherever you are, whatever you're listening to me on, would you please just help me out? Just tell me what brought you here. What question do you have in your mind? What makes you interested in this topic? Are you struggling with it? Are you already measuring your return on investment? You want help with that? You want to do it better? If you're not sure what a return on investment is, that would be great. Let me know what you think and what your questions are. This will be a shorter session if nobody asks any questions. That's okay with me because I'm having fun, but it may be more valuable to you. I'm sure it will be more valuable to you, and I will learn more as well as you will. If you ask me some questions, tell me what's bringing you here. So please do that in the comments. And I'm going to dive into another question for you, which you do not need to write in the comments because I think everyone, at least those of you who are not Dutch, will have a cow when I ask this question. What I want to know is what your house is worth if you own a house. Or if you don't own a house, what's your car worth? Or if you don't own a car, what's your bicycle worth? So some large item that is highly valuable to you, you might think that you'd want to know how much it's worth. And my question to you is, how much is it? Don't write that in the chat. I don't need to know. You don't need to actually answer this question. But what I want to do is just have you think a little bit about how you would answer it. Because what I suspect is that it's not got an obvious answer. However, here's another question I don't want you to write in the chat. But if I ask you the question, what is in your wallet? What do you have cash right now? That's a question that I suspect you could answer a little more easily. What's the difference between these two questions, and how's it relevant to measuring technology return on investment? Well, the thing is that we don't mark to market houses very often, whereas we mark to market cash all the time. We actually know how much cash is worth. Marking to market is a financial concept. It comes from banks and folks like that. Hedge funds have a big discussion about how they should mark to market, what kind of marking to market they should do. It means take whatever it is you own, go and measure it in the market as if you were going to sell it, and then determine what its value is and write that down. That's all it really means. The problem is that there are certain things like houses that we don't do that with very often. You probably, very few of you have probably put your house on the market anytime recently. And if you haven't, then you don't actually know what it's worth, because there's not a ready market in houses. You can't say my house is just exactly like every other house, and therefore it's worth exactly this much, because all of them are worth that. You can try to do comparisons, and there's a whole industry in people estimating what houses are worth. That's a very valuable thing to do, but it's not a very precise science. It doesn't tell you exactly what it's worth. Whereas the pounds or dollars or drachmas or whatever it is that you have in your pocket, those are given a very clear value. You probably bought some coffee this morning, or you are going to purchase a pizza tonight, and you know that this many of those notes and those coins are worth this many of whatever it is you might be interested in. So there's a very clear definition of the value, and it's marked to market. You know how much it is. It's measured. For example, we measure dollars against pounds all the time, right? You could look up the exchange rate anytime you wanted, and you could give me a value for what's in your wallet. So there's this distinction between things that are easy to value and not easy to value. And the solution to things that are hard to value is to mark them to market, to somehow make some kind of model, make some kind of action that you can take. And when you take that action, it tells you how much the item is worth. Well, guess what? We can do that in technology, because technology is like houses. It's not like your wallet. When you have a technology asset, it might be a software product that you have. It might be a software process. It might be you're using low code techniques, so you don't actually have any software you run, but you're running something like Shopify, or you have a bunch of Airtable instances, or Google Sheets. I was talking to an insurance company today that has an awful lot of its material in Google Sheets and other tools like that, which tell them what their current sales are, what their exposure is, their loss ratios, those sorts of things. So in their amount of code, I was reviewing them and giving them an assessment of how they're performing. Some of their code is not in code. It's actually in Google Sheets. And wherever it is you have technology, and almost certainly in your business you have a lot of technology, it's not that valuable, value space a bull, because there's no market that you can immediately go to and say, if I add this extra column to my Google Sheet, if I put this extra piece of data in my report, if I give you this much of a discount, and give you a discount code you can use on your next purchase, it'll be worth this much more, and I'll gain this many more customers. That's not a measurement that's easy to make in the same way that you can check the price of the pound against the dollar. So we typically don't have a method of marking to market for our technology. And I'm going to take you through an exercise in a moment that will help you think about that. Here's a LinkedIn user. Hallelujah, that means we're on LinkedIn. Good, at least that's working. Question, and I don't know who it is. Unfortunately, LinkedIn doesn't always tell us who it is. So if you want me to know who you are, you can tell me, but otherwise you're going to be anonymous, interesting person. Says, question for you, what's your approach to disentangling the impact of tech versus sales and marketing versus customer support efforts when assessing return on investment. Often multiple initiatives are happening in parallel, and it can be challenging to distinguish the effects of each. Brilliant question. I'll give you the brief answer and then make sure I come back to this. Don't let me get off the call. But Laura, you keep me honest too, because I want to do it in the context of what we're going to talk about. But the brief answer is don't distinguish them. We're not writing an academic paper. We don't need to know that it was exactly this initiative that made the difference that caused this result to happen, unless you're an absolutely giant organization. I mean, if Mark Zuckerberg's on the call, please let me know. Facebook probably does need to distinguish these things, because whatever they're doing in China also needs to be replicated in the US and then replicated in Europe. And there they really do have experiments where they need to know which bit is attributable to what. But almost certainly for the sizes of companies that almost all of us are in, and the ones that I typically consult with, which are just a little bit smaller than Facebook, those companies don't need that level of information. So let me come back to that question. It's a great question, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. Roland asks another one. Hi, Roland. Excellent to see you, as always. He's not even started to think about ROI yet. His current challenge is marketing to market more frequently. Okay, great. So you want to get the number. We're going to talk about this in just a second. How do you elephant carpaccio? That's the method we're going to talk about in a minute. You guys are anticipating everything, which is great. I really appreciate that. It gives you a little outline of where I'm going. In a B2B environment that is sales-led growth, few but high-value customers, perverse stability over frequent new features. Okay, so I'm going to come back to that one. Great question, Roland, but again, keep me honest, make sure I come back to it, because I want to talk about it. Some people watching this will not know this elephant carpaccio idea, which I'm going to get to. So coming back to both anonymous user and Roland with answers to those questions. Thank you. So let me take you through an exercise to kind of think about this. Roland says he's not thinking about ROI yet. Think about it now. So I'm going to help you to do that. Write down for me the denominator of your return on investment calculation. Some people might not know return on investment. That's the numerator. It's a fraction. The numerator is how much you're putting in. It's how much you're getting out. It's the sales. It's the result in cold hard cash, what's in your wallet as a result of whatever it is you're doing. And the denominator is what the investment costs. So if I am a taxi driver and I buy a faster car so that I can get people to their destinations quicker, then I might invest £20,000 in a car, and I might get a benefit of an extra £500 a month. Well, that would take me a while to pay it off, and it might not be a good deal. Whereas if I got a faster car for £30,000, but I was able to earn an extra £10,000 a month, well, that would pay off pretty quickly, right? That would be a pretty good return on investment over, say, a period of a year. So I'm sure my taxi examples are not very good ones because I'm not a taxi driver and not in that industry. But that's what return on investment is. You measure what you're putting in and you measure what you get out, and you see what the ratio is. If the ratio is less than 1, you got a problem. If the ratio is more than 1, you're pretty good. If the ratio is a lot more than 1, tell me about it so I can invest. Okay? So what I want you to do is calculate the denominator of your technology investment. And lots of you know that I like to do things quite rough and ready and quick. And that's why I'm telling the anonymous person we're not going to worry too much about attribution, because I don't want you to go and look up everybody's salary and make a big spreadsheet and add it all up and make sure you include every amenity or perk or benefit that you might provide and the extra salad that you get in for lunch for everyone every day. We're not going to do any of that. We're going to take a very, very rough calculation of the people cost in your technology organization, wherever it might be that you're working. Your cost might be 0. That would be a very interesting one. But then we're going to think about what's, if you don't have any developers, what software are you using and what are you paying for it? There's probably some payment somewhere. It might be very small. That's one reason that the low code techniques are very valuable. The people who are using Google Sheets and so on don't incur this cost. So that means their denominator is very low. That means their numerator doesn't have to be as big for it to be a big payoff. But probably most of you have some engineers. You have some people who write software and they sit in front of computers and they type stuff in. Magically, computers do stuff. Whether or not you know how that works, I'm hoping that you know at least how many of them there are, because all we're going to do is multiply by a fixed number. And the number I'm going to suggest you use is 100,000. Now, that's not because every engineer in the world costs you 100,000 of whatever it is. Notice I didn't tell you what currency it was. Yeah, if you're in India, you might have to add a 0. If you're in someplace else with a very valuable currency, you might need to remove a 0. But roughly in dollars and pounds and euros, 100K is kind of the gross cost of an engineer. This is what I use when I do a really rapid mental calculation of the return on investment for my own work. When I talk to someone who's interested in engaging me, I think, well, how many engineers are there? How much impact am I going to have on them? And what's the denominator? Well, it's the number of engineers times 100K, because the typical cost that dwarfs everything else is the cost of the people to make the software and make it run. Because software has this wonderful multiplicative effect, right? Software does not cost us anything to make. It doesn't cost us anything to make a new one, or the cost is so low that it's the cost of printing it on a CD in the old days, which I remember, or the cost of distribution over the internet, which is very, very low, pennies compared to the costs of an engineer. So take the number of engineers you have, multiply by 100K. That's your denominator. Now, your numerator is much harder to determine. And if you think about this, this is what we're coming together to talk about, really, because I took a poll on the Squirrel Squadron forum. I was mentioning that the forum before. And on the poll, the last time I looked, I think we had 50% of people who said, I have no idea what the numerator is. I have no idea. I had no way of measuring this. There's nothing that I can do about that. That's what we're going to talk about the rest of the time. But I wanted to make sure we talked through how you do the full return on investment calculation. You got to know what you're putting in. Just for a comparison, by the way, I had somebody talking with me, a coaching client just recently, who was saying, man, I need to triple my team. I need to make sure it's much bigger. I really need to grow the team. I really need to. I kept saying, you keep saying need. I'm not sure I believe that. And an example I shared with him, which you can look up and investigate yourself if you want to know more, is that Instagram sold for $1 billion. Now, that's a sale, right? So that tells you the numerator. We're very clear on how much it was worth. So the value of the company was $1 billion. And if I recall correctly, there were 13 engineers. I might have that slightly wrong, but even if you multiply 15 or 20 by 100K, you get a very, very much smaller number than 1 billion. So you don't have to be as good as Instagram in order to get a tremendous return. They certainly did very, very well, but they built a very valuable organization. They built very, very valuable software that people are still using today and getting a lot of benefit from cat pictures and fashionable pictures and whatever else they look at. And they did that with a very small number of engineers. So there's two ways to improve on your return on investment. Increase the top number or decrease the bottom number, and you probably don't have to increase the bottom number as much as you think in order to grow. That's the lesson here. Okay, but now we're going to focus on what we do to measure the top number, and I'm going to use Roland's example because he's set me up perfectly for this. He's saying, well, how do I measure frequently? And that's something I promised. I said, if you could do this frequently, you'd be in great shape. Instagram knew at a single point that they were worth $1 billion. But what did they know the day before that? What did they know the day after that? Did they become less valuable after they got bought? Did they become more valuable the day before? But what was happening? What's the graph, right? You know it at an instant, but you'd really like to know it over time. And the method that I recommend for that is, as Roland referred to, something called Elephant Carpaccio. This is a method invented, well, the name was invented by a chap named Alistair Cockburn, Cockburn. And he's a very clever person, been around for much longer than me, and wanted to explain how he marks to market every hour. So he can actually tell you the value of what he's producing every hour as he writes code. Now, I don't claim to be able to do that because he's an interesting, clever guy, but I can tell you how to do it every day. And that's what we're going to talk about. The method I'm going to illustrate, and I'm going to illustrate it in a B2B environment that's sales-led. So I think my illustration, Roland, is going to be pretty close to what you'd like to do. But I suspect you're going to have, and others will have questions. So please argue with me, discuss, talk about this example. But when you and what I'm not going to cover is the stability point that you raised. I'm going to come back to that one. But this example kind of illustrates what elephant carpaccio feels like. You're taking a big elephant, that I should explain the term, a big elephant, a big feature that you want to build. In this case, it's going to be a color picker. So this is something that shows you a whole bunch of different colors. I'm terrible with colors, but it shows you, a little wheel of colors, and you pick one, and then it shows up someplace. I had a client who wanted to do this. They wanted to add one of these to their software so you could change the color graphs that they were showing. It's a company called Gecko Board, and that make beautiful graphs. And so they wanted to slice this big elephant of add a color picker into teeny weeny slices. And if you've ever eaten carpaccio, I'm a vegetarian, so this is tough for me, but it's meat that's sliced so thin you can see through it. so I could see all of you, or at least my camera, through it if I were holding some carpaccio in front of me. So we're slicing into tiny, tiny pieces. And what's difficult is to understand how small these pieces can be and how much you can estimate the value of your software with these tiny pieces. So here's the illustration. They said, well, what we could do is spend a week or two actually building a full color picker and then slam it out to users and see if they use it. That's more like the Instagram example. Not taking quite as long as Instagram and not quite as valuable, but they could say, we'll do it all at once. They said, we want to do this carpaccio thing. We want to know every day if we're on track. Why would you want to do that? Of course, if you're not building something valuable, if the graph is going down, you'd like to do something else. So they could abandon it or change it or do something else so the graph goes back up. That's the value of marking to market very, very frequently, for example, every day. So what they did first was they built a button, and the button said, pick color. And the button was up there on the screen, and they put it out to a small group of users. This goes a little bit to Roland's point about stability. We'll come back. But in a part of the screen, there's a button that didn't used to be there. And when you click it, nothing happens. You just go click, click, click. Now, you don't get to pick any colors. Nothing pops up on the screen. The button doesn't work. But the good news is that when you click the button, they get to see that somebody clicked the button. Now, of course, some people complained. They put it out to only a small group of users, friendly users, the kind of people who would be likely to complain and say, what's this new thing? It doesn't seem to work, rather than, you jerks, it doesn't work, right? So that's a helpful protection. But the good news is that they had a lot of people clicking it, and they could phone some of them and say, hey, what did you want to do with this button? You know, I know it didn't work. We're trying to fix it. We're trying to make it work. And what should it do? And they gave very valuable feedback to let them learn, first of all, people do want this button. They would like to change the color of their graph. And second, they want to change it in a way that they hadn't expected. So they were able to adjust what they were doing. So that took one day. So after one day, they were able to gather this feedback. The next day, they had the button bring up a picture, a JPEG of the actual color picker. It was literally a picture from the web, as if you would go to Google Images and search for it. It did not have any color picking functionality. You click things, nothing happens. It's a picture, right? It's a picture of a color picker. And you know what it looked like. You know, it's got the circle and it's got all different colors around it and it has a box, but none of them worked. So they put that up, and then people continued to click, and they said, hey, hang on a second. Now I got this thing, but I can't click. So they said, oh, can we jump on a call? And so they got on calls with people, and they looked at what was on the screen, and they said, oh, okay, you're clicking this and you expect that. Oh, we didn't understand that. Oh, and now you're doing this. They could have a dialogue going about what the value was. And as they had this dialogue, they were increasing the value of the software at each point, and they could see how much they were increasing it. At any point, they could have stopped, but they kept getting positive feedback. Yes, I want this. I want it to work this way. This is the right thing, but this part isn't right. And so then they made a color picker. They got one from the web. I think they just got a standard one. They put up the color picker, and but it didn't actually change anything. So you could actually click the different buttons, and it would update, but it wouldn't change the color of the graph. And you see where this is going now. Each of these things took one day, and the users would give them feedback at every point, and they could measure and estimate how much this value was creating. Is this going to be 10% more people who convert? These are a lot of people in a free process, a freemium model, where they were going to convert, and they could estimate, we got this much interest. When we have more interest in a feature, we tend to get this much more conversion rate, and these people seem to be getting this much value, and they could ask them. So they could come up with an estimation of the numerator. They knew how they were putting it on the bottom, which is, so far, if you've been keeping count, 3 days. So 3 days of engineer's time, that's the denominator. What's on the top? Well, we're estimating how many people are going to convert. Oh, this seems promising. We're on track. At that point, they continued with a few more steps, day by day, always getting more feedback at every point. And eventually they finished the color picker. And today, if you go to Geckoboard, you can pick your colors. So that's an illustration of how Elephant Carpaccio works. And this is in a B2B environment, heavily sales-led. They were very interested in conversion rate and getting more people to sign up. So people are in businesses using these graphs in their corporate environments, but they were going through this freemium process of having a free version, and then they wanted to see how many people would convert. So that's one way, Roland, that you can get that kind of feedback by having people go through an early process like this. Now, your environment may be very different. You may not have people buying in this kind of kick the tires way, so that you can get this kind of feedback. We'll talk more in a second about what might work for you. But the crucial thing for everybody to take away is This is a process that your engineers know how to follow. Your product people know how to follow this process. This is a commoditized process. When I started as an engineer, my gosh, a very long time ago, 24 or 25 years ago, this was not off the shelf. It was not something that you could just download libraries for, that you could just install and use a bunch of tools to make this kind of thing possible. I remember the company I was working at had a huge number of servers in a server room that we had set up specially, that whole team working on it. And we were able to do some of this or experimentation on a frequent basis. But they had invested a huge amount in order to do that. Today, it's a commodity. It's almost as easy as Shopify, that probably all of us, whether we're technical or not, could go set up a Shopify shop, because it's been kind of worked over. It's been developed very in a very sophisticated way, so that it's very easy for any of us to set up. It's the same for your engineers. Now, why aren't they doing this? Why aren't they out there actually measuring and marking to market? Probably because nobody has told them that that would be valuable. And that's the argument I'm making to you, is that you could do this and it would be tremendously valuable to you. And we're going to talk about lots of variations and the situations that are relevant to each of you and the questions I'm getting. But if you take nothing else away, I want you to remember that if you were to convince your engineers that you actually wanted to do it, they could do it fairly trivially. And if you could get that kind of very frequent marking to market, it's as if you had a little sign on the front of your house that says, this house is worth this much. And the sign changed every day. Well, then you know an awful lot about the value of your house. And if you wanted to do things like adjust your mortgage or trade in houses, and often sell your house and move to different houses every few days, that would be very valuable. We don't want to do that with our houses, but we absolutely do with our software, right? We want to be adjusting our software, improving the value. And just like you might add a conversion, a conservatory in the back of your house, or you might paint it purple, those are things that affect the value of your house. And wouldn't it be nice to know whether you were increasing or decreasing the value of your house when you were doing it? It would be nice to have in your personal life. It's valuable, it's vital in your business life. Okay, so Roland, I've been promising this. You've got few but high value customers that prefer stability over frequent new features. Now that's where it's different from GeckoBoard, because GeckoBoard had quite a number of customers. So I was saying, a bunch of them different, trying it out, kicking the tires, clicking the buttons, and they could get feedback from them. You're probably not in that situation. So you have a smaller collection of people who can give you feedback. And those people, as you're saying, prefer stability, and they'd really like the system to run the same today as it did yesterday, because they've trained a bunch of people to use it, for example. So if you stick new buttons in and nobody knows about it, you're going to increase their costs and make them unhappy, even if you have new functionality. I'm guessing that's what it is. Roland, you correct me if that's not the case. So let me give you an example that's much more extreme, the other direction. And this is a biotech company that I worked with in Cambridge that does essentially builds a medical device. It's not quite technically a medical device, but it's a tool that's used in testing. And if you want to verify that people have certain kinds of diseases, you take this test. And what somebody explained to me early in my consulting role there was that if people didn't pass the test, if you got a negative result on the test, then you might have some quite invasive surgery. You might cut off part of your body or cut out part of your body because this test told you that that part was diseased. So they said it's kind of important we get it right, because if we give people a false positive, they're going to go off and take a drastic step, remove part of their bodies. We kind of don't want to get that wrong. So that's an extreme version of wanting stability, right? We would not like to introduce a new button that says, hey, maybe that this will tell you 10% more accurately what your results are, or maybe it'll be wrong. We don't know yet. Press the button if you feel lucky. That doesn't fly so well in medical circles. However, we were able to get to marking to market and really understanding customer value every 2 weeks for them. It wasn't every day, but because they had a number of compliance procedures and other things that they needed to follow in order to get new versions of the software out. But they were able to do so. And what we found actually is that the compliance people, the ones who were begging for the stability, actually were begging for understanding. And I don't know if this is your situation, Roland, but what I'd encourage you to do is have a dialogue with the people that you think are saying we need it to be stable, and understand exactly why they need stability. What you may find is that they say, look, we really want it to be stable because we want it to be safe. We don't want to have people cut off parts of their bodies. But if we understood what was being changed, and if it was a small set of changes that we can control, that would be okay with us. That's what we heard at the company that had the medical device. The compliance people were actually very happy with the idea that instead of rolling out hundreds and hundreds of complex changes, which might have some very complicated interactions every 6 months, we were going to make a small set of changes every 2 weeks, which they could understand. They said, that's much better because we know we can test this one and this one and this one, and we know the interactions among them. And we know if those are all okay, then the software is not going to kill anybody. It's not going to cause them to take drastic action. And even if it doesn't work perfectly, we're okay with that because we know we've controlled for the danger part of it. And maybe people won't get the report quite as in quite as good a format, but we don't care about that. We care about keeping patients safe. So that was a tremendous success for that organization, which really valued stability probably more than yours does, Roland. I think I know where you are, and I don't think you're having people cut parts of their bodies off. So that's one approach. Now, there's another one, which is you may go find the people who want this stability or that you think want stability. And you may find that they say, look, I need stability for the reason I was alluding to before, something to do with I don't want to disrupt users. I have a whole customer service organization that has been trained on using this software. I have a regulation that's the third party. It's a distant organization outside my company that mandates to me that I can only make changes once a quarter, something like that. So they may tell you, look, we just can't touch production. That's okay because you can still get proxies for the market. And this is similar to when you're trying to price a house and you can't price that house, but you can price the one down the street that looks pretty similar, same number of bedrooms, hasn't been painted purple with polka dots, and sold last week for a certain amount. It doesn't give you a perfect judgment of your numerator, but it gives you some pretty good impression. And so proxies that you can use include friendly customers. So it might be that there's somebody who says, look, I don't care about stability so much. Those guys do, but I'm okay. So experiment on me, please, or experiment in this way. You can use feature flags. So only a certain percentage of your customers see something, or only a certain percentage of the people in the customer service center see it. If it's 1% of the people and they see something new, that might not have nearly the training effect that you can have if you suddenly change everything overnight for 100% of the users. You can have internal proxies. So it may be that, look, your customers just are not accessible to you, or they're not interested, or they're not your friends. They don't like you've broken the system before, and so they don't want to help you. But you might have salespeople, your own customer service people, your own account managers and operations folks. And those folks can be proxies, and you can try out the new features on them. The key thing is that if you can get this rapid cadence going, even if it's an imperfect measurement, it'll still give you a trend line. So it may be that your salespeople are more optimistic. They always tell you that the new feature is worth having and it's very valuable and get it done now and it's wonderful. And when you get to the real customers, that doesn't always match up. Not that I've ever met any salespeople who do that. Salespeople are naturally optimistic, right? So if you're using them as proxies, they may have a bias in one direction. That's okay, because you're going to get a graph over time. You're going to say, okay, I'm increasing the value, I'm increasing. Oh, wait a minute, something's happening here. It's getting way lower. It may be that they're being too optimistic and the actual graph is lower down. I don't care. I want to know the trend. I want to know the derivative. I want to know where the line is going. And if the line is going down, I want to change and do something else so I can be responsive. Roland, I hope that's helpful on your points. If it's not, by all means, ask me more questions, argue with me. I'd love to hear more comments and thoughts from you. I appreciate your very helpful question. Now, there was something else I was going to say about this, and I'm just trying to remember it. It was to do with stability. It's gone out of my head. I'll come back to it. Okay, so where else did I want to go? Right. So I want to try now the attribution question, which we got from still anonymous user. Oh, and glad Roland says that was very helpful. That's spot on across the board. Great. So the anonymous user says tech versus sales marketing versus customer support. So now I hope that what you can see is we have a method of measuring what changes, what effects we are getting. And you're saying, well, what if we make several changes at the same time? What we'd really like is to have a controlled experiment. And if anybody knows of a circumstance where people have really run a controlled experiment, I'd be interested because I've never seen one in hundreds of companies that I've worked with, where someone has said, okay, I'm going to do this with this group, and I'm going to do this exact same thing and nothing else will change and I'll do something else with that group. What you see very frequently, for example, in marketing, is people will try one set of copy on Facebook and another set of copy on LinkedIn, and they'll see how they perform. Now, of course, there's a confounding factor. Maybe different people are on Facebook and then are on LinkedIn. Or they'll try one landing page for half the users and another landing page for the other half, and they'll try to see what the difference is. But there are lots of things that confound that and make a difference. How fast was the internet connection that day? Was there a bug that annoyed the users? Was there some event that happened in the world that might affect your business and causes more people to search for your product on one day than another? There are lots of different things that can change up a marketing A/B test of that kind. Does that stop marketing people from running A/B tests? Absolutely not. They do their very best to try to control the factors and reduce the confounding nature, anything that might interfere with their tests. But they don't go to great lengths to do that. And they say, well, look, we made a lot more money on Tuesday than we did on Monday. And the thing we did on Tuesday was to use shorter copy. So we're now going to use much shorter copy. I actually had an example of this where a company I worked in that did e-commerce, we sent millions of emails every morning to loads of people about our great deals. And everyone had an opinion about what the best subject line would be. Should we include the discount? Should we include the brand that the discount was on? Should we include both? Should we include our name? What should the subject line of the email be so people would open it? And somebody decided, well, we're actually going to do an experiment. We'll try a bunch of different subject lines, see what works. Guess what worked? Just the brand name. Not even what the discount was, anything else. Just it came from us, and it said, we're selling Louboutin shoes, or I used to know lots of Calvin Klein jeans or whatever. It would just say the brand name. And then people would have to open it to figure out what's the discount, what's available, what things are in stock. But that got people to act. And we made that change, and it made a huge difference to our marketing return on investment, very similar to the tech return on investment we're describing here. So anonymous person, when you are doing multiple initiatives in parallel, great. Do the best you can to reduce them, but don't let that stop you from learning. Because if you continue to make the same type of tech changes, let's say you've got a graph and it's starting to go up and you're seeing the increased value every time, you're able to measure mark to market what the results are from different things that you're doing. And there's a lot of confounding factors. There's a lot of other things happening that are interfering with the results you're getting. If you keep making those changes and the graph keeps going up, you've got some pretty good evidence over time that there's something happening in technology that's valuable to you. Whether or not you've measured it perfectly, and whether it's a 10% rise or a 20% rise, or you're increasing revenues by 1 million or 2 million, doesn't matter as much. Get the trend line right and make sure you understand where the business is going, what benefits you're getting. That's the crucial thing to do. So I hope that's helpful, and I'd love to hear from that user if for any reason it isn't, or if I'm missing the point that you have. I'd also love to hear from anybody else who has questions and thoughts. As I say, I'm much better when I get fascinating, disparate questions from you guys, and I can help you with them. But I continue, as I have at least a couple more things to mention. Something people often say is that they also want to get some kind of balance sheet. They want to understand what assets they have. And I have a tool for this that I've been refining recently, which I'm going to follow up on in the forum. So if you're in the Squirrel Squadron forum, and if you're not, sign up. But in the Squirrel Squadron forum, I'm going to refer to my tech radar, which I've just been refining. And that's a method of understanding what are your assets that go into this. So not just what am I dynamically putting in every day, what am I putting my engineers' time onto, the denominator, but also what assets do I have? What could I benefit from? Do I have high quality code? Do I have good tests? Am I able to monitor my system? Do I have a good organization? Do I have the right leaders? Those are things you can actually measure in a very similar way to what we're talking about today, marking to market the dynamics of your system. You can also mark to market the static. In other words, what's the assets that I have? So I just want to encourage you to have a look. And I think I can find the URL. I'm always dangerous to try this online, but let me just see if I can find the place to read more about that. Give me just 1 second. If I were smart, I would have had this up before, but I didn't think of that because I didn't remember that I wanted to talk about this. So there we go. I've got it here, and I can put it in so all of you can see it. It's radar.html on my site, douglassquirrel.com. So If I stick that in and then show, that should then appear. There we go. So if you're interested in not only marking to market the dynamics, but also you want to look at the statics, what are the assets that we have in our technology, that's also something you can measure. And one reason I wanted to mention this is that both this radar method of measuring your static assets and the dynamic methods we've been talking about today for marking to market, understanding what your technology team is doing dynamically in real time, both of those are things you can do without necessarily being a technology person. And that's the point of the Squirrel Squadron, is you do not need to be a CTO, a geek, a person who has been writing code since they were 6 like me. You can be someone who has never written a line of code in your life, and you can measure these things. So you can come up with a model for what's the benefit of increased conversion rate, measure the conversion rate, get the numerator, and the denominator, as we said, you can do in a couple minutes with a calculator and a number of engineers. That gives you enough to determine, am I up, right side up? In other words, I'm getting more than what I'm putting in, or as far too many of the people that I talk to find when they do this calculation, they find they're upside down. Unfortunately, I'm losing money on my technology organization, and I'm not aware of it. And that's the biggest danger that I see. Okay, do we have any more questions? I want to make sure I deal with anything that people are interested in. Do shout if you see anything, or if you've heard anything that seems unbelievable, difficult, challenging. If you say, man, I'm not sure how I would apply that, I'd love to hear it. I'm going to give you a few seconds to do that. And if there are no questions, I'm going to finish early and go enjoy hanging out with my wife's guide dog. I'm not seeing any of some pop up. I will grab them, but I will just start to tell you what you can do from here. So if you just came across this and you said, my God, this is a crazy idea, but I'd like to hear more, then the place to look is at, if I can spell, now I can't spell, and my R key isn't working very well, squirrelsquadron.com. That's the place to go to sign up for more of these. The events I talked about, like supply chain and wowing your board with technology. We're doing those free events. All of this is free. This isn't something that I do to charge you for it. It's for me to give back and to get tech and non-tech people working together. So have a look at squirrelsquadron.com if you'd like to sign up. I'd love to see you in the squadron. I do weekly emails. I do the weekly events. I do live events. And there's a forum in which you can discuss. I'm not seeing any other questions, so I assume I've stunned you all into silence, or wowed you with new ideas, or turned you all off. I'm not sure which, but I had fun, which is most important. And I hope that it was valuable and helpful to you. If you're looking for this on the recording, of course, you can do all the same things and interact with me there. This recording will be available if you want to share it with other people right after this. It'll be available on whatever platform you're using to watch me on. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day, everybody.